We have any space enthusiasts in here?
Yes.
Right up front? Okay. I know we probably have some who are not as well, so I want to just set the context a little bit, set the stage a little bit. What has changed in the last decade or two that has spurred this private sector space race? Jaret, maybe you can start for us.
Sure. I think the most significant change was NASA's move away from owning and operating their own vehicles like the space shuttle and entrusting commercial industry to provide services for their needs. So, for example, through their commercial orbital transportation system contract in 2008, that was the impetus, to let SpaceX develop Falcon 9 and Dragon and ultimately ferry astronauts and cargo to the International Space Station. And now NASA just buys, tickets on Dragon the way you would on an airliner.
Wow, expensive tickets.
Yes. Yeah.
Kelly, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, as well as that, the private investment in space as well. For a good number of years, the government was the main investor in space and the provider of the various technologies. And I think now we're seeing growth in commercial applicability to satellites in space, as well as different types of industries in space as well. And as you see those type of commercial applications coming forward, then you kind of see just so much more investment in the private sector going there and just huge growth.
At an even higher level, why is this important? Why is this work, why is going beyond Earth important? A lot of money's going into this, right? I don't know if either of you, happy to hear your thoughts.
I think to a degree the expansion of humanity beyond Earth to the Moon and Mars is inevitable, and I think most people would agree on, you pick a time scale, 50 years, 100 years, 500 years, whatever it is, most people would agree that that's the case. And because it's within our current means, I think we actually have a moral obligation to do it now, to spread humanity and preserve the light of consciousness, going forward. Inevitably, some calamity will befall Earth, be it, nuclear war or pandemic or climate change, right?
Really bringing me down.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know.
So I buy into this notion that, we really, to survive as a species, we really need to continue to move out amongst the stars.
And honestly, I think that any technological advancement that you can make and any exploration that you can do is critical to just the growth of humanity itself. And so I think it's essential, as long as it doesn't come at the cost of the Earth, as long as you can do it in a very green and reusable fashion, I think it's a moral imperative, as Jaret said.
And there's a long history of these investments providing tremendous benefits to life on Earth, of course, cell phones, GPS, weather observation, et cetera. So the same will continue to happen as we push forward as well.
Fascinating.
You'll see advancements in pharmaceutical manufacturing as well as semiconductor manufacturing, taking advantage of the low gravity up there. So you'll just see large kind of advancements overall in various industries.
So it sounds like you two have no doubt, it's just a timeline question.
Oh yeah.
Correct. And what's unique about this specific moment in history is you have two of the richest individuals on Earth, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, through their companies SpaceX and Blue Origin, investing billions in creating the long-haul transportation network. Right? They're building Starship, the most powerful machine humanity's ever created, can lift more than 100 tons into space, and those billions are being backed up by billions from NASA through their Artemis program. So there's something like $30, $40 billion going into developing these vehicles over the coming few years. And it's going to open up access to places like the Moon at scale to enable industrial activity.
So hey, wait a second. It's not just billionaires who are doing that. We're looking at space transportation as well. So vote for the little man here.
Sure.
We like the little guy too,
Yeah.
And gal. So why don't we get a quick look of what you're working on at Stoke,
Sure.
and maybe you can help talk us through as we look at this video of what we're watching here.
Okay, sure.
Let's cue that up, please.
You want me to go now?
Oh, you can go now.
Okay, so this is our rocket. We're obviously launching there. And there we are with the stage separation. So there you see our first stage breaking away from our second stage. That is our second stage. Our second stage right now is fully reusable, so it will come down. We also have many different uses for it as well as an on-orbit mobility vehicle. Here you see it landing on the Moon. That base heat shield that you see there is incredibly robust, so it allows us to land in austere environments and not, suffer from things like regolith or sand, and you'll see it landing here, I believe as well, on sand. So any of that dust that's kind of kicked up doesn't necessarily hurt it in any kind of way, so it's much more easily reusable.
And
I wasn't aware that was the one we were showing, so.
oh, well, surprises
It's a good one, though.
sometimes good and sometimes not, but you rolled with it. And the importance of reusability, it may be obvious, but can you just spell that out for us?
100%. So if you think about airline travel, the idea that you would throw away a plane after you used it once is just silliness, right? You wouldn't even think of it like that. So we need to think about rockets the same way. The way to bring down the cost of launching, satellites or rovers to space is actually to reuse them, and reuse them not just once every couple of months, but to reuse them over and over again very, very rapidly. And so with our second stage, we're not using ceramic tiles, we're not using an ablative heat shield, we are instead using a regeneratively cooled heat shield, which is, you saw, it was that kind of metal shield that you saw.
Sure.
It's incredibly robust and allows us to very quickly turn over and send another rocket to space.
Last thing before we
Yeah.
cue up Jaret's video, what is the timeline of this? So that was not current reality what we saw, correct? That was
not.
okay. What is the timeline where you're working on to have an actual launch?
To have an actual launch, the end of next year.
End of next year. Jaret, I think we're going to get a look at your, I'm going to forget the technical term, I'm going to call it a rover.
That's fine, yeah.
And why don't you walk us through, as we watch this video, what we're looking at and timeline as well.
Sure. At Astrolab, we're building FLEX, or the Flexible Logistics and Exploration Rover. And FLEX is designed to be the most versatile platform ever sent to the moon. FLEX is unique in that it has a number of modular interfaces that allow us to do a wide range of activities and serve a wide range of customers. So it's built to not only conduct science and exploration, but also deploy infrastructure like communications and power infrastructure. But it can also support Artemis astronauts. And as you mentioned in the intro, we recently won a significant NASA contract to do just that. And the idea is that FLEX will serve as a catalyst for the lunar economy to help build out industry. And essentially our initial business model really is doing last mile logistics on the moon.
You talk about the UPS of the moon?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So if you think about, again, Starship, for example, can put 100 tons of cargo on the moon. And so we're working to solve the last mile problem for all that cargo, get that out to its final destination, set up, and maintain. Yeah.
Someone asked me last night, who are you delivering packages to, when I told them about the UPS on the moon pitch. But there is a long-term plan there, right?
Absolutely. What's unique about NASA's program Artemis, which is the follow-on to Apollo?
Yeah, can you quickly explain what the program sets out to do?
Sure. So Artemis is the sister of Apollo in Greek mythology, but Apollo was all about beating the Russians. Flags and footprints, getting there first. Artemis is about going there to stay, and so actually developing a sustained presence of humans on the moon in perpetuity. And so that, of course, is going to require a lot of logistics and support. But also, they've structured the program in such a way that it's going to encourage commercial activity as well. So our contract, for example, is a service-based contract.
What does that mean?
That means NASA's essentially, we're Uber to NASA. So they get mobility services from us, right? They don't own and operate our vehicle. It's our vehicle. So we can provide those services to anyone who wants to pay. And because SpaceX and Blue Origin are really solving the long-haul transportation problem at scale, and Stoke and others.
Yeah, she's going to get you until you say them in the same sentence.
Soon the economics of getting tons and tons of cargo to the moon will become palatable, and that will enable industry to take off on the lunar surface. So there's a symbiotic relationship between Artemis and commercial industry here. Yeah.
I want to get some audience questions as well. Everyone who said they were space enthusiasts, I'm counting on you. So whenever anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we'll get to it. I do want to know, Kelly specifically, so SpaceX is also developing reusable rocket. I guess one question is, how does that impact your small company or not? And then who is going to win this race? and if you consider it a race.
Sure. So first of all, I want to say that SpaceX has paved the way for us. They have really enabled kind of the growth that you see in this industry, and they've been, pretty much trendsetters. So we do not aim to compete with SpaceX. We absolutely believe that there is a place for both
A little
of us.
bit? Like
What?
tiny bit?
Well, sure. If we would beat them to actually full reusability,
Okay.
I would definitely tout that. But I believe that they will probably get there first. You can see a number of their launches and how quickly they are iterating on that and how successful they've been. And so I definitely think that there's a place for both of us. They'll be, as Jaret had said, much more of the large freight, huge kind of movement. But you'll also have a place for much smaller type of things, like think of your transporter van or your sprinter van that Amazon kind of employs. And so that's where we see kind of our sweet spot is much more of a very direct and targeted, I would say.
What's a use case that you're imagining for something your rocket would be carrying, or a business that would be partnering with you?
I would say with Starship, you're going to have a huge number of satellites that you're going to deploy at once. And so with us, you're going to kind of deploy not necessarily the entire constellation, but you're really aiming to deploy a plane of satellites, so a bunch of satellites that are in a very similar type of location, and you could do that much faster. So you don't have to.
And the goal of whoever was providing those satellites would be what?
Well, it would be Earth observation, it would be communications, it would be all of those types of things. And so we would be able to directly kind of deliver that, as opposed to waiting for a number of them to aggregate on the launch pad before you can fill up that entire volume and then send it into space.
Sounds complicated.
It sounds complicated. It's rocket science, right?
It is rocket science. Do we have any questions? Otherwise, I could keep going. Right here.
Yeah, okay.
You got a mic coming.
I can yell it.
No, it's okay. Just tell us who you are.
Thanks. Healy from Boom Pop. Thank you so much. This is so fun. One of the things that I always think about in venture investing is, it's like the time horizon can only be so far out for them to invest in it. And it feels like you have two things that are kind of wild here. One is a pretty distant time horizon, and the second is, I assume, really expensive lines of code, because if it's up there, it can't really mess up. So how do you think about that when you're thinking about investments and ROI and just all the work you're doing? Feels like it's a big bet.
Yeah, well, first I would say it's closer than you think. So, we have a commercial contract to go to the moon on one of SpaceX's early Starship missions, and our contract window opens at the end of 2026. So, in the space business, that's tomorrow. And also, the Artemis program is already underway. They've already conducted Artemis 1. Artemis 2 is coming up in the next 6 to 12 months. So,
astronauts will be back on the moon in what year?
Right now, the advertised date is 2026.
Advertised.
These things have a way of changing over time, but but it's within the time horizon of venture, for sure.
Kelly, do you have thoughts on the
you
investing?
asked about the time horizon, then you also asked about once it's up there and not being able to make changes. And so mine comes back, so we can iterate in that way. But to Jaret's point, I would say in these types of time frames, it's right around the corner.
Yeah. So to your other question, I worked at JPL early in my career, and we routinely sent up software patches to Mars. So it's there. You anticipate needing to do that, and it's okay. Yeah.
One question about you already have some. You talked about working with SpaceX to send whether or not you continue working with NASA directly. You will send a rover with SpaceX up to the moon, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And you have customers already who are paying you to do what?
Well, yes. So we've actually signed about a dozen deals with commercial companies to go with us on our first mission, which is a purely commercial mission. That's the 26 mission. One is, for example, Hewlett Packard Enterprise. It's a Fortune 500 company.
Yep.
They are already doing edge computing in space on the International Space Station, and now they want to do it on the moon. So that's one use case. But what's interesting is actually the diversity of use cases that our customer base has. There's a cluster in resource based business models, so taking the resources on the moon, be it titanium, aluminum, rare earth metals, oxygen, water, and creating value from those things. The moon is about the size of Africa, has the same surface area as Africa. So I really liken this opportunity to essentially continental in scale, in that we're standing on the shore, we're watching these vehicles get built that will take us there at scale, and we're opening up access to this huge place that has lots of valuable resources. So anyway, going back to your question, we have people in the resource utilization space, basic science, including a company putting up a greenhouse, data services, as well as construction, people interested in building habitation or landing pads on the lunar surface. Yeah.
And a lot of those customers are actually our customers because they need to actually have materials brought up there, or they need to have things brought back.
Wow. You two have a direct partnership yet, or would there be any reason for that?
Not yet, but I'm certainly open to it.
Okay, we're gonna try to make some business. At a very high level, for people in the room who may never work in the space industry, may just be enthusiasts, how is some of the work you're both working on, like how will it materially affect our lives? Can you give us some like realistic use cases or changes in our life here on Earth?
Well, I think, as Jared had mentioned before, you think about GPS. Everybody uses GPS right now, but that was enabled by basically satellites that you have in orbit. If you think about Earth observation, when you look at weather or resource management for farming, or even disaster relief, all of those things impact us daily, but we don't think about where that data comes from and how it's generated. So I would say all of us, whether you're using Google Maps or you're talking on, you're using some sort of comms, all of that is afforded by what we do and kind of the efforts to put things in space.
You have any extra thoughts, Jared?
Yeah, I think any activity happening in space ultimately has to benefit life on Earth. Otherwise, it's not going to create value, right? And so all of our customers and partners who we're working with are building business models with that as a foundational principle. We have one customer who is their plan is to use lunar resources to actually reverse global climate change by building a sunshade between the Earth and the sun and lowering the global temperature. So, their TAM has a Q in it. They don't specify if it's quadrillion or quintillion. At that point, it doesn't really matter, I think, once you have a Q in your TAM. But and so ultimately, I think any activity is going to benefit Earth. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. Yeah.
Any other questions? We have one right here. There's a mic coming up to you. Thank you. Please just tell us who you are and your affiliation.
Hi, Betsabe Madani Herman. I'm the global head of research at Philips. We do healthcare, but I applied to be an astronaut years ago. So there is the space enthusiasm. When it comes to basic science, so physics, bio, etc., is there a breakthrough you're looking forward to that would make a material difference in the work you're doing? Is there something that, if that was solved, your engineers and scientists would be just so stoked?
Stoked.
I thought you did. No. At this point in time, it's just engineering, at least to accomplish what our immediate goal, which is full reusability. It's just hard engineering at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. No miracles need to happen. We have the means, and as I started out by saying, that's why I think there's a moral imperative to do it, because it's within our means to do so. Yeah.
I think we had another question over here. We have another mic.
Hi, Lisa O'Connor with Accenture. And I started in space a long time ago, very short stint. I had a question about, you mentioned GPS, and that's one of the services many of our companies are codependent on, whether we're in logistics or just moving around ourselves. I think of space as a little bit of a contested place because we don't sort of have agreement into what should be happening there, let alone on the moon. Can you talk to that, to how that might impact what you're doing?
No one wants this one. That means a good question. Thank you.
I would say space is definitely contested. And if you look at some of the national security strategies, you hear about space being talked about as a warfighting domain. You see the establishment of the Space Force and the Space Combatant Command. So it is definitely a contested environment. For us, we will follow the U.S. government's lead in what that means and provide as much help as we can to the U.S. to help with national security.
So specific to the moon, what I think is interesting is the rise of China, and they've been very successful as of late landing on the moon and even returning samples from the moon. And so there is a bit of a race going on, in terms of who can create the most value. Particularly, there's areas of strategic interest at the south pole of the moon where you have accumulations of resources that are very interesting. And there isn't a lot of law in place to govern how that space is used. There's the Outer Space Treaty from the 60s, which basically dictates that people operate in a non-interference basis. But the interesting thing, on the moon is that, what does interference mean? If you land something on the moon and you're operating it, does that mean you can declare a huge exclusion zone? Because if someone else lands near you, the dust they kick up is going to destroy your existing assets. So there's an opportunity for some country to do a de facto land grab in these areas of strategic interest by just putting spacecraft down on the moon and operating them.
Well, we're out of time, but I could go really deep on that last answer, maybe next year or the year after. Thank you so much to both of you.